Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. With Greenland and Iran gripping the world's attention lately, the latest developments in Ukraine threaten to pass by relatively unnoticed despite their pivotal significance. From Russia's escalatory actions, the plight of Ukrainian civilians struggling to make it through unprecedented blackouts, to Kiev's latest government reshuffle. Here is a look at the crucial stories that matter for Ukraine and for the rest of Europe. Joining us here today is Mariya Zolkina, Associate Research Fellow at the Ideas Foreign Policy think tank of the London School of Economics. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for the invitation.
So it's impossible not to start with the pendulum apparently swinging once again towards blaming President Zelensky. Donald Trump says that the main obstacle to ending the war is not Putin, it's not Russia, but President Zelensky himself. What do you make of it?
I think that's a kind of political deadlock now, because the only thing we lack for at least the ceasefire agreement, I don't even speak about the broader peace agreement, is agreement of Russia to at least several steps, security ones. So the Europe, together with Ukraine, has developed a joint position which was presented to American delegation within this several rounds of negotiations, and to President Trump in particular lately.
And so Zelensky made so many concessions, actually.
Absolutely. And in Ukraine, back at home, we do have a very uneasy discussion about how and whether we can agree to something which was presented basically in those 20 points right now. But we don't know to what extent Russia is ready to sacrifice or agree with something at all. And it seems that American negotiators, in particular Witkoff and Kushner, who tried to push up the process a little bit, they don't have success here as well. Unfortunately for Trump, it's easier to continue to blame Ukraine. No one understands for what now, honestly, but everyone understands that this is just to justify why there is no peace deal.
How many concessions did Russia make during that entire peace process?
Actually, nothing significant. The only thing Russia actually changed the position in regard to is the size of Ukrainian army, because in 2022 they demanded something around 60,000 of Ukrainian army, and everyone understands it's not possible at all. I mean, when Ukrainian army is over 1 million of people right now. In terms of other things, I would say that Russia, during the Trump first year of presidency, has increased the strength and strengthened its demands towards Ukraine. In particular, Donbass, the whole Donbass given up to Russia, was not on agenda before Trump came into the White House. And this is what Putin presented to Trump this last summer. And for instance, we don't have anything from Russia, which they have agreed to sacrifice with.
Well, they have derailed, or at least tried to derail the entire process with the completely fabricated news of a Ukrainian attack on Putin's mansion.
Absolutely.
And Trump acknowledged that it was not true, and yet he's saying Zelensky is the problem.
The problem is that Trump doesn't think he should push Russia or make a pressure on Russia. In a symmetric way, he's making pressure on Ukraine. I think after...
Why is that? Because Russia warned him not to seize an oil tanker traveling from Venezuela under a Russian flag, but the US seized it anyway. So it's not like the US is afraid of Russia.
Absolutely. But in terms of the global chessboard, I think it's pretty clear right now that there are global powers settlement which should be in place. And this global powers is the circle which includes Russia in terms of Trump administration. So they think that they should be pretty loyal to Russia, politically speaking, to try to make a compromise at the cost of Europe and Ukraine, who are not part of those global players table, let's say. China...
What would it involve if such a settlement is made?
China, US and Russia, just China, though it's a competitor and even the opponent to US, it's still part of those global players circle. But however, for Trump, we always forget that he instead not only peace deal he wants to have between Ukraine and Russia. He wants business to be restored and reincarnated between US and Russia. And if we remember about this, we will understand why he's not making that pressure on Russia, because he needs them to be interested in cooperation and the new business deals. That's why the second track of negotiations between US and Russia is not about negotiations on Ukraine or around Ukraine, is about new economic projects, including in Arctic region, which is another piece of interest of Trump, speaking about Greenland.
Greenland, of course, yes. Now, I would like to talk a bit about the government reshuffle in Ukraine. Mikhailo Fedorov, the new young, tech-savvy defense minister, will he be able to make the necessary changes to Ukraine's army? He's got the experience in digitalization and new technologies, but what about fighting against bureaucracy?
I think he's pretty good at fighting bureaucracy, and he proved this with the ministry he was leading for several years, the Ministry for Digital Transformation of Ukraine. And he was also responsible for different relative sectors because he was a vice prime minister. But still, even though he is a pretty successful bureaucrat, let's say, and public servant, no one really understood why it was so necessary to replace the previous Minister for Defense, Shmyhal, who was before that the Prime Minister of Ukraine, long-serving one, because this reshuffle basically is the replacement of people within the same government, honestly. If we just research and study this long chain of changes, we will understand that the main problem is lack of public servants in the team of President Zelensky who want to occupy sensitive position like Minister for Energy Policy. And there was no one in the team who was ready to be a new Minister of Energy after the previous one was charged with the corruption cases and accusations for that. And only the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, who was the Minister of Defense and has great experience with energy policy and really is a good bureaucrat and public servant, was ready to take a position because he is technocratic one. He is a person. So basically, there was no need to replace the Minister of Defense. However, there was a necessity to fill in the gap with the other position, and only, Shmyhal was ready to do that. That's why it's not about the competences which have changed, and it's a good story that Shmyhal was, as a Minister of Defense, replaced with Fedorov, who is really good at organizing the process within public institutions. I think we will not have any, repercussions of this replacement at all.
What changes do you think are going to be made? There are some criticism concerning the law that prohibits drafting people between the age of 18 and 24. But on the other hand, one could say, well, people do need some sort of hope. They do need to have a future beyond being drafted into the army, and that Ukraine still needs to fight to maintain this reserve of people rather than sending them all to the front line. What do you think of that? This is a controversial subject, isn't it?
That's a controversial subject, and there are different opinions in Ukraine. However, the decision of the government and President Zelensky to allow young Ukrainian men who are younger than 22 years old to leave Ukraine was motivated exactly with political and partially demographic reason, because Ukraine is losing its people. Many of them are not having families even before they are dying or wounded, and it means that their life will be changed forever, even if they are alive but wounded. So basically, this decision was made personally, as they say, by President Zelensky, who really wants these people probably to be able to move around, still continue studying at Ukrainian universities, because the reason is people are leaving Ukraine, I mean male ones, at 17 years old, because they start studying at the universities and knowing that if they stay in Ukraine and study at Ukrainian university, they will not be able to leave even for 1 week abroad. They choose, many of them chosen before just to go for Western universities, including Polish ones. They became very popular for Ukrainian students for that reason. And that was kind of a way out to allow them to some left, of course, and numbers are significant. However, some stayed, and they benefit from the possibility for traveling, studying still back at home at Ukrainian universities. And there is a hope and demographic statistics or arguments in support of that, that if we have a stable ceasefire within the next several years, there is a high chance these young people, right after universities in Europe, will be going back to Ukraine.
So there's balance to be struck. One final question. There has recently been a discussion about military involvement in Iran. The argument was that the killing must stop. Now, the killing in Ukraine doesn't stop, and yet no one is willing to go that extra mile towards helping Ukraine fend off Russian attacks. Of course, there are weapons deliveries and all that, but why doesn't the same logic apply? I'm not referring just to the US administration. Generally, the West as such, especially given the blackouts in Ukraine threatening so many vulnerable people with a loss of life.
The main reason for Trump, in my opinion, why he's so brave when it's about Venezuela or about Iran, is that he is not afraid, and he thinks of overthrowing the government and changing the political powers who is in power. So he is not afraid of what will be with the political regime present, or might be interested in changing the political regime who is now ruling one or another country. And it's not the case with Russia. He still likes Putin. He wants Putin to be in place because this is understandable, and some contingency and continuancy of political logic of Russia under Putin for over 20 years. So basically, no one wanted after 2022, including Europe, including the former American President Biden, to make any political instability in Russia, which will create political chaos. So everyone tried. We are either ignoring Putin as a political figure and try to stop Russia, but we are not doing anything which might bring, the regime change situation in Russia in place.
The better the devil you know, in a way.
Yeah. Let's remember the situation when the Prigozhin tried to organize some kind of manifestation, and even the threat of changing the regime. At least he claims to do so in Moscow, and everyone was feared in America, and everyone tried even discussions, at least between experts with whom I work. So for Ukraine not to try to do anything at that point, just because we don't know what will happen in Russia, and it's better if Russia is centralized and we know whom to
different
talk.
Approach would be necessary. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Still, very important issues there. Hopefully, we'll be able to discuss them further. Mariya Zolkina was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks.
And I'm Jonasz. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news and updates.